Well, welcome back to part two of Chapter 11, Advertising in MC 101. I mentioned in the lecture on part one that we would come back and look at some persuasive strategies that advertisers use to gather our attention, to command it, and hopefully to plant in our brain the seed of an idea that will cause us to buy products. Persuasion strategies is the subject of this lecture. We'll have a number of examples that I have taken from magazine ads in recent years that I think probably serve as good examples to make a point in helping you to understand what a persuasive strategy is and how advertisers use that to manipulate our way of thinking, to engage our brain, to receive the message that they want us to receive. Page 304 in your textbook is where you'll find more information about this. But let me begin with this preface as I put the 5 different persuasion strategies up on the screen for you, that you won't find these 5 in particular discussed in Chapter 11. This is additional information that I'm sharing with you. And so when it comes time for the second exam in this semester, you might want to come back and take a look at this lecture one more time. The 5 strategies that you see on the screen, I'm about to take them one by one with examples for each, but I want to preface this discussion by saying a couple of things. One is these are 5 of the most popular strategies, but they're certainly not the only ones that advertisers use. You might notice right away that humor, which for television commercials is particularly important, but it's not one of the 5 that we're discussing here today. And I think also it needs to be said up front that there's certainly no law, no regulation that an advertiser use a particular strategy in the message that they send to us. So as I explain these to you, and as you look at the examples, I think you'll recognize what's at work here and how the message is trying to utilize a psychological approach to put the idea of that message into our brains. So the first one that we begin with is the famous person testimonial. Many advertisers over the years have discovered, hey, if there is a personality out there, a TV star, movie star, recording star, athlete, whatever, that people really connect with, if we hire them to be the spokesperson for our company and to go into a magazine ad or go into a TV commercial and pitch our product, maybe we can use that to increase sales. But I have placed on the screen for you a couple of examples. What happens when the spokesperson does something that puts themselves in a bad light and by way of transferal also creates negative publicity for the company that they represent. And you may be familiar with the 2 people that you see here, and you can certainly go online and find out the kinds of things that they did that caused their employers at Subway and Buffalo Wild Wings to drop them as official spokespersons. A lot of income went down the drain simply because of some rather inappropriate things that they did. And again, these are 2 examples, not the only ones. You certainly may be aware of others, such as bicyclist Lance Armstrong, who several years ago, after winning, 7 multiple Tour de France sports bicycling activities, but after his association with drug doping, all of the endorsements that he had under his wing just sort of seemed to wander away. I don't have it on the screen, but you may recall the incident with the swimmer Ryan Lochte at the 2016 Summer Olympics. And after he got involved in that false police report of the robbery at the gas station, brought tremendous shame to himself and, by way of transferal, to the companies that he was representing. And one by one, they dropped Mr. Lochte as a spokesperson for their products and services and you could just see like water swirling down the bathtub drain. Money was just slowly draining away from Mr. Lochte. Here are some examples of testimonial advertising for hair care products. Do you recognize the three ladies that are pictured here? Some of these ads are now beginning to approach maybe around 10 years of age. Some are more recent than others, but the actresses Halle Berry and Salma Hayek in the center and Zooey Deschanel on the right, over various periods of time, have appeared in magazine ads for these advertisers that you see here. Notice that in these ads, you don't see any direct quotations of what either of these three actresses have said about this product. This is sort of a mind association tactic that's at work here, and advertisers have learned that a testimonial ad can be pretty effective, even if the famous person says nothing about the product. We associate, for instance, Zooey Deschanel with Pantene, and it's not necessary for her to have to say anything about this product. There are some people that will look at this, see her image, automatically assume that she uses this product, and the next time they're at the store, yeah, they pick up and purchase the Pantene products. Okay, more famous person testimonials here. I'm sure you recognize Larry the Cable Guy, and he's pitching for a Prilosec for heartburn relief. Now, in the lower right-hand corner, you do see a block of information, but notice that there aren't quotation marks around these words. So this block of information here is provided by the manufacturer, but it is not telling us that these are Larry the Cable Guy's spoken words. It's just information that they have provided. Here's another pharmaceutical that is endorsed by Rascal Flatts. Now, one of the members, Gary LeVox, has spoken on behalf of this product, and what you see in the little block in the left-hand side down toward the bottom is an actual quotation. So in certain instances, you might see the famous person speaking words that are in support of the product they're advertising for. But look at Gatorade and Wrangler here, three famous sports personalities, and almost nothing other than just the photo of the famous person, the famous athlete. And for many people, just seeing them, for example, with the Gatorade bottle in their hands, or even drinking the bottle of Gatorade, well, that's sufficient reason. You know, the psychology here says, hey, if it's good enough for them, it must be good enough for me. And that, for some people, that's sufficient reason to go out and buy the products. You might recall the University of Missouri football player Michael Sam from several years ago. And at the time of his graduation, and he was drafted, and for a while was a member of the roster of the former St. Louis Rams. The reason that I include him here as a famous person is he was openly gay in his sexual orientation, and he signed a contract to become a celebrity spokesperson for Visa, and some people questioned whether or not that was an appropriate match for Mr. Sam. So, the famous person testimonial, do you understand what's going on there? A company will hire a famous person to be featured in advertising for the company's product, and because we relate and sometimes worship some of these people, that provides a sufficient reason. If it's good enough for them, it must be good enough for us, and we buy the products. Now, here's the second of the five that we'll be talking about today. The plain folks strategy is a type of advertising approach that says, a lot of us out in the world really are just plain folks. We're not super famous. We're not super rich. We're not super talented, employed at some really high-profile position, but there are lots and lots and lots of us out here in America. And so advertising using the plain folks pitch, again, relies on that transferal and that association principle. In other words, if the product is good enough for these people, it must be good enough for me. Take a look at the Pringles ad, for instance, using, I think rather cleverly, the potato chip to represent the smiles of mom and dad and the daughter, and a simple message over on the right at the top of the can that says that they're right for everyone. So if they're right for everyone, right for mom and dad and the daughter, well, they must be right for me as well. Here's an ad for the Cheeseheads, the Green Bay Packer Cheeseheads, and it's an ad for duct tape. That is a brand name, by the way. And again, you see the image of 5 plain, if not somewhat extravagant people. But, if duct tape's good enough for them, particularly in NFL team colors and logos, well, by golly, it must are expressed. I want to back up to the full shot because there's something else going on in this ad that we'll talk about in Chapter 13 later this semester. And that is that there's quite a bit of controversy over this idea of using the female image as a sex object to sell products. And I won't dwell on it too much right now, but I would ask you to note, and I think this is a legitimate concern, that the way that this advertisement, this photograph is constructed and presented on the page, notice that we're not allowed to see this woman's face. We see a portion of it, but certainly not enough to recognize this person by face. And the criticism is that some advertisers who use females in the depiction of their advertising treat them as objects rather than as unique individual human beings. And so in this instance, the focus is entirely on her body and not on the whole woman as an individual herself. That's a real controversial issue in advertising, and since your author of the textbook doesn't pick up and discuss this until Chapter 13 when we talk about media effects, I'll just put that issue out on the table and let it rest for several weeks, but we will come back to this topic later in the semester. And I think it's only fair that we give, if we show the female depiction, then let's bring the men in also. So here's equal time, ladies. This is a magazine ad. I don't know if you can tell or not, but this one splashes across 2 pages of the magazine on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. I note that simply because 2 pages cost twice as much to put the message out there as the single page does. So you can certainly understand that a lot of money has been spent by Jockey to convey this plain folks message for their underwear. Of course, the firemen being the plain folks that are being depicted here. Let's move ahead to our third persuasion strategy, the one called bandwagon. Before I even show you some examples, let's talk about that term for just a moment. Do you know what a bandwagon is? It's not a term in its literal sense that we have much occasion to use today or that you would hear in conversation. But if we dial things back about 150 years ago to when the time in which the circus would come to town and all the posters would be displayed around town, the circus is coming, get ready for the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey or whatever. The bandwagon, many times when the circus arrived, the bandwagon would lead a parade right down the center of town, and people would hop onto the bandwagon for a free ride to the circus tents at the edge of town. So if you ever hear that phrase, hop on the bandwagon, what that is saying is, in essence, you don't want to be left behind. If you don't hop on the bandwagon, you won't be taking the ride to the circus. You'll be missing out. So it's almost like a taunt. Don't hop on the bandwagon so that you're not left behind. And believe it or not, that works as a rather successful, persuasive. I want you to adopt. And I'm sorry, wrong button again. So let's move this direction. How about this one by the liquor manufacturer Bacardi? What makes this a bandwagon persuasive strategy? Nothing really is said here, but if you look at the expressions on all these happy people who are partying and appear to be holding drinks containing the Bacardi product, the message is come to the party. If you're not here, if you're not at the party drinking this particular alcoholic beverage, then you're left behind, and nobody wants to be in that position, regardless of how poor taste the message might be. Again, bandwagon, in the sense I know it's difficult for you to read the fine print. It's not necessary. I'll explain it for you. But the idea is that if you're not a part of the green movement, and if you're not buying into this idea of helping to quote unquote save the planet, then you're not on that bandwagon, and you're, in this instance, a fuel hog who is wasting energy. Okay, 3 down, 2 to go. Let's continue. Let's take a look at this strategy called snob appeal. Do you know what a snob is? Sure you do. I like to think about that taunt that children do out on the playground sometimes, where one child picks on another and, says something like, nya, 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 I'm better than you are. Well, that's snob appeal. And believe it or not, it appears in advertising. And I've got some examples to show you. What's What's the snob appeal for the sob? Say that 3 times in rapid succession. It is a tongue twister. The snob appeal that Sob is passing along here is found in the headline. Look at what it says in the center of the screen. Takes other cars' lunch money. Yeah, this car beats you up out on the playground. It takes your lunch money. It's a better product. It's the one that you need. Yeah, that's snob appeal. It's ahead. It's ahead of others. This synthetic motor oil, the Castrol product, has a great big headline. Our oil can beat up your oil. Yeah, we're better. We're better than you are, and we can use physical force to prove it. Our oil can beat up your oil. Let's continue on this automotive theme. Hey, don't get the wrong idea. Snob appeal is not just for car and automotive products. I just happen to have 3 examples from that category that seem to work here pretty well. Headline in the center of the screen, holds 4 keisters, kicks all the rest. Well, for that headline to make sense to you and for you to understand the strategy, do you know what a keister is? Yeah, some of you do. Maybe all of you do. For those of you that don't, it's just the part of your anatomy that you sit down on. So, I don't know why they chose the term keister. Today, I think it would be perfectly okay to say holds 4 butts, kicks all the rest. It's a butt-kicking car. That's all we need to know. It's the snob appeal at work. This car is better than other cars. And by the way, look at the front grille. Does it seem like that car is smiling at you? Smokeless tobacco. It's a pinch better. Skoal is. Okay, snob appeal. A pinch better. It's telling you right there in the ad. Back to automotive again. This is a pretty bold statement here. The average sedan has 6 speeds. We don't make average. We are above average. We are better than the rest. Snob appeal is at work. This is one of my favorites. It happens to be about 10 years old now. And so I'm not certain when you look at this that maybe you get the same point today that a magazine reader might have gotten 10 years ago when this ad first appeared. So let me explain in case you're scratching your head over this one. Here we see a young man in an apartment paying complete attention to the flat screen TV that's attached to his wall. There is absolutely no furniture in this room of the apartment. The only thing that is in there is the box that the Pioneer flat screen TV came in, which you might be able to see is serving double duty as both a chair or sofa and as a dining table, because his fast food is sitting there to the left-hand side of him. But do you understand what's going on in this ad? Perhaps not, and let me explain why. 10 years ago, the cost of a flat screen TV this size was thousands of dollars, not the hundreds of dollars that we would pay at Best Buy or Walmart or Target today, but thousands of dollars. And so the idea that the manufacturer is trying to get across with snob appeal is that he has invested so much money in this big screen TV that he doesn't have money now to buy furniture for the apartment. But he's got one hell of a TV. And so when you come over to watch TV with him, his TV will be saying, in essence, that I'm better than you because I've got this really expensive TV. Sorry, by the way, that I couldn't afford furniture to put in the living room here. All right, let's wrap things up now with the fifth, the idea of hidden fear. Oh, and how many times has the principle of fear been used to sell us products? And you probably don't even think about it. Here's a little thought question. Out of all the human frailties, out of all the fears that we as human beings experience, what, in your opinion, is the ultimate fear? Think about that for just a moment. The ultimate fear for a human being. And most people would probably say it's the fear of death. But you know what? I would agree with that. But you know what's a close second runner-up? The fear of speaking publicly. Do you have a fear of doing that? Well, at any rate, advertisers tap into our hidden fears because we don't like to have surprises. We don't like to be embarrassed publicly, and so by paying attention to the messages and buying the products that are advertised, we can avoid having an encounter with these fears that we don't like to have to face or confront. Up at the top in the left-hand section, you see just a short sentence that says, foul weather friend, bad weather friend. The hidden fear that's expressed in this ad is the fear of death. In other words, you don't want to be driving on a dark, lonely road on a rainy night and be driving a car that can't handle the road properly. If it can't handle the road properly under these conditions, you might have a wreck and you might die. Now, the ad will never say that, but that is the message that is implicit in this ad for Subaru. It is tapping into the hidden fear of death. How about this one? Take back your freedom. This is for the vapor here, who is appearing in the ad for this particular brand of electronic cigarettes. Take back your freedom. What's the hidden fear here? Well, some people can't relate to this if you have never been a cigarette smoker, but the fear that's being presented here is that, as I'm told that some cigarette smokers have, of being in a situation where they want to be able to smoke, but because of regulations or the situation or the environment, that they're unable to. That's their fear of wanting to smoke a cigarette in a location where they can't. And so this product, which is not technically a tobacco cigarette, is one that can be used in situations where otherwise a tobacco cigarette could not be consumed. I love this one. I just absolutely love this one for the Uniball. The headline underneath the photo in bold, always send the right message. Now, this one you might need to look at and think about for just a moment. Look at the note that was written with, I'm presuming, an inferior competitor's product, and the message says, I never loved you. Well, and it says something else. What does it say? Maybe it says, I never loved you as much as I love you now. But that's quite a different message than what it says, I never loved you. So what is the hidden fear? That you're conveying one of the most romantic and sincere message about affection that you could for another person, except that the message that you intended to send is entirely opposite from the one that you wanted to send. So don't find yourself in this situation of writing a message like this by using an inferior writing instrument. Only the Uniball will do. Hidden fear here? Well, take a look. I'll let you figure that one out on your own. And then let's wrap up the discussion with this one here. This is another one that you have to take a look at and think about for a moment. Two older ladies, they seem to be at the fair. They seem to be wearing cotton candy hair, pink cotton candy hair. This is an ad for the American Express card. What in the world is the hidden fear message? And I've looked at this for several years, and I've thought about it, and I've come to the conclusion that this is one that taps into that bucket list fear. Have you seen that movie from several years ago, The Bucket List? Well, that's what I see the message tapping into here, which is that you don't want to get to the end of your life where there are certain things that you wanted to do, but for whatever reason, you never got around to doing them. You don't want to die and leave planet Earth without having done these things. And the only thing I can make sense out of in this ad is the hidden fear that these two ladies who might be approaching the sunset years of their life didn't want to end their lives without ever going to the fair and purchasing some pink cotton candy hair. Now, you might see it differently, and it might seem to you, if I'm correct, that it is kind of stupid, but it certainly caught our attention, and it certainly got us to thinking, didn't it? Now, whether or not it'll cause us to go out and apply for American Express cards, well, that might be a discussion for a different time. Right quickly now, let's wrap up. Let's take a look. What's the strategy going on here? What do you see in this ad? Well, if you see plain folks, I think you see the same thing that I see. Millions of songs, one little price. Love them or hate them, you get them all. And that's what all these people are rejoicing over, just as you and I would if you purchased the Rhapsody service. Okay? You know what's going on here. You recognize the basketball player, don't you? Yeah. This is a pretty neat testimonial type of approach. How about this one? Plant in a shady location, like your armpits. Yeah, that's hidden fear. It's the hidden fear of having a smelly underarm situation. So that's why you want the Suave antiperspirant. How about this? Yep, you're right. Hidden fear again. You don't want your physical appearance to be compromised by an inferior product. And this one trips up some people sometimes when they take a look at it. And the question that I ask in the classroom when we look at these is, what is the product that's being advertised here? Okay, well, before we talk about that, let's read. It says, like ours, their reserve collection is made from the finest ingredients. And so people read this and they look at it and they say the product that's being advertised must be wine or champagne. And in fact, no. The product that's being advertised here are custom-made garage doors by the company Clopay. Now, the key to understanding this is to look underneath the picture of the garage doors. It says, only ours gets better every time you open it. Okay, it's the comparison. A bottle of wine or champagne, once it's opened, and part of it is consumed and maybe the cork is returned, and then it's opened again maybe the next day and the next day after that. But after it's initially opened, that product begins to deteriorate and is something less good every time that it's uncorked and poured from again. Every time it's opened, it deteriorates. But the Clopay garage door, it gets better every time you open it. A good contrast there between garage doors and a bottle of fine wine. Or at least that's the message. Now, what's the strategy here? Let me repeat that. What's the strategy here? Well, perhaps to define the strategy, it might help to know what Bottega Veneta is. And I don't know. I'll leave it up to you. Maybe you can figure it out. I don't have an answer to this question. I just thought these were two interesting magazine ads that appear in a magazine that my wife reads. And maybe you can figure it out. But after 3 or 4 years of looking at these 2 pages, I can promise you that I haven't figured it out yet. Okay, so 5 persuasive strategies. Remember now that these are not discussed in detail in your textbook. So when it comes time for exam review, let me encourage you to come back and just sort of skim your way through this lecture again so that you understand the persuasion strategies that we've discussed. So that brings to a conclusion our Chapter 11 discussion on the subject of advertising. Take care.